Goblino pressed his small green face against the cracked window of the abandoned warehouse he called home. Outside, the morning fog rolled through the narrow alleys of Grimhaven's lower reaches, carrying with it the familiar smells of rotting vegetables, soot from the factories, and something else he couldn't quite name. At 8 years old, Goblino had learned to identify most smells in the slums. This one was new. "Goblino, get away from that window before someone sees you," hissed Nana Wartooth from her pile of tattered blankets in the corner. She wasn't really his grandmother, but she'd taken him in when his parents had disappeared 3 winters ago. Most goblins, in the lower reaches, looked out for each other when they could. "But Nana, there's something different today. Look!" He pointed excitedly at the street below, where a peculiar sight was unfolding. Instead of the usual parade of weary factory workers trudging to their shifts at the smoke-belching plants that towered over their neighborhood, there was a small crowd gathering around something bright and colorful. Goblino had never seen so many colors in one place in the lower reaches, where everything was painted in shades of gray and brown. Nana Wartooth shuffled over, her walking stick tapping against the wooden floor. Her milky eyes squinted through the dirty glass. "Well, I'll be pickled," she muttered. "Looks like one of them upper-reach folk has lost their way." Through the window they could see a goblin unlike any they'd ever encountered. She was tall and elegant, with clothes that sparkled even in the dim morning light. Her skin was a healthy green instead of the pale, sickly colour most lower-reach goblins developed from working in the factories. But what caught Goblino's attention most was what she was doing. She was painting, not the crude graffiti that sometimes appeared on walls, quickly scrubbed away by the city cleaners, but real painting. She had an easel set up right there in the middle of Puddle Street, and she was capturing the scene around her with bold strokes of colour. The ramshackle buildings, the broken cobblestones, even the group of curious children who had gathered to watch her work. "Can we go see Nana?" "Please?" Goblino's voice was full of wonder. Nana Wartooth frowned. "You know the rules, Little Fang. We don't draw attention to ourselves. The less the upper-reach folk notice us, the better." But Goblino was already pulling on his patched coat, the one Nana had sewn together from scraps she'd found behind the tailor shop. "I'll be careful. I just want to look." Before Nana could protest further, he was racing down the creaky stairs and out into the street. The morning air hit his face with a mixture of cold and excitement. He'd never seen a real artist before, not in person. The crowd of children had grown larger, forming a cautious semicircle around the painting goblin. Goblino recognized most of them from the neighborhood. Scratch and Pebble from the old brewery, Little Moss, who lived under the bridge, and even Sludge, who was usually too mean to join group activities. "What's she doing?" whispered Pebble to no one in particular. "Painting, you toadbrain," Scratch replied, but his voice lacked its usual sharpness. He seemed as mesmerized as the rest of them. The artist looked up from her work and smiled at the children. Her teeth were white and straight, not like the chipped and yellowed teeth most goblins in the lower reaches had. "Hello there," she said in a voice like music. "I'm Luminara. Would you like to see what I'm painting?" The children shuffled closer, Goblino among them. What he saw on the canvas took his breath away. It was their street, their neighborhood, but transformed. The broken buildings seemed to glow with warm light. The puddles reflected the sky like mirrors. The children in the painting looked healthy and happy, their eyes bright with possibilities. It's beautiful," Goblino said without thinking. Luminara's eyes found his in the crowd. "What's your name, little one?" "Goblino," he replied, feeling his cheeks warm with embarrassment at being singled out. "Goblino," she repeated, as if testing the sound. "That's a strong name. Do you like to create things, Goblino?" He thought about the little figures he carved from scraps of wood when Nana wasn't looking, the stories he made up in his head during the long, boring hours when there was nothing else to do. "Sometimes," he admitted. Luminara reached into a canvas bag beside her easel and pulled out a small sketchbook and a piece of charcoal. "Here," she said, holding them out to him. "Every artist needs tools." Goblino stared at the offered gifts as if they were made of gold. I can't take these. Nana says we shouldn't take things from upper reach folk." "Your Nana sounds wise," Luminara said gently. "But these aren't charity. They're an investment. Sometimes the most beautiful art comes from those who have seen both the shadows and the light." Something in her voice made Goblino look up at her face more carefully. There were lines around her eyes, and despite her fine clothes and healthy appearance, there was something familiar in her expression, something that reminded him of the look in Nana Wartooth's eyes on the hardest days. "Were you—" he started to ask, then stopped. "Was I from the lower reaches once?" She finished for him. "Yes, little one. A long time ago I lived not far from here, in a place much like that warehouse." She nodded toward the building where Goblino lived. The other children gasped. Upper reach goblins didn't come from the slums. Everyone knew that. "How?" asked Moss in a tiny voice. Luminara set down her brush and looked at each of them seriously. "By believing that where you start doesn't have to be where you end up. By practicing every day, even when it seemed hopeless, and by never, ever giving up on the idea that beauty could exist anywhere, even here." She gestured to her painting again. "This is how I see your neighborhood, because this is how it really is. Full of strength, resilience, and yes, beauty. You just have to know how to look for it." Goblino took the sketchbook and charcoal with trembling hands. They felt warm and full of possibilities. "What do I do with them?" he asked. "Draw what you see. Draw what you feel. Draw what you dream," Luminara said. "And remember, every great artist started exactly where you are now, with nothing but a dream and the courage to begin." A loud whistle echoed through the street, the signal for the morning factory shift. The crowd of children began to scatter, some heading home, others hurrying to their jobs in the smaller workshops that dotted the lower reaches. "I have to go," Goblino said reluctantly. "Of course." "But, Goblino," Luminara called as he started to leave. "I'll be back next week. Same time, same place. If you want to show me what you've drawn, I'd love to see it." Goblino nodded eagerly and ran back toward the warehouse, clutching his new treasures. Behind him he could hear Luminara talking to some of the adults, who had begun to venture out to see what the commotion was about. Back in the warehouse, Nana Wartooth was waiting with a worried expression. "What took you so long? And what's that in your hands?" Goblino showed her the sketchbook and charcoal, his words tumbling out as he told her about Luminara and the painting and the promise to return next week. Nana's expression softened as she listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You know, Little Fang," she said finally, "I used to draw when I was about your age." Goblino's eyes widened. "You did?" Nothing fancy, just little pictures in the dirt with sticks. But I loved it. She touched the sketchbook gently. Life got in the way, as it does. But maybe it's not too late for dreams, after all. That evening, as the factory whistles signalled the end of the day shift, and the lower reaches settled into its familiar rhythm of survival, Goblino sat by the flickering light of their small fire. He opened the sketchbook to the first clean page, picked up the charcoal, and began to draw. At first his hands shook with nervousness. What if he wasn't good at it? What if Luminara had been wrong about him? But as he continued, something magical happened. The charcoal began to move more smoothly across the paper. Lines became shapes. Shapes became recognizable things. He drew Nana Wartooth's face, capturing the kindness in her eyes that he saw every day but had never thought to preserve. He drew the view from their window, but like Luminara had done, he drew it as he felt it rather than exactly as it looked. The broken buildings reached upward like fingers grasping for stars. The narrow alleyways became rivers of possibility flowing between them. "That's lovely, dear," Nana said, looking over his shoulder. "You've got a gift." Over the next week, Goblino drew constantly. He drew the other children playing in the streets, finding ways to show their laughter and energy even with simple charcoal lines. He drew the old goblin who sold roasted nuts from a cart, capturing the gentleness behind his gruff exterior. He even drew Sludge, the neighborhood bully, but in Goblino's drawing, Sludge looked lonely rather than mean. The sketchbook became his most precious possession. He carried it everywhere, hidden under his coat, so no one would try to take it from him. During the long afternoons when Nana napped, and there was nothing else to do, he would find quiet corners and practice, always practice. Some of his drawings were better than others. Some made him proud, others frustrated him so much he wanted to tear them up. But he remembered Luminara's words about never giving up, and he kept going. On the appointed day, he woke before dawn and pressed his face to the window again. Would she really come back? Adults sometimes made promises to children they didn't keep, especially adults from the upper reaches. The weekly art lessons became the highlight of everyone's week. Even Nana Wartooth began joining them, picking up a brush for the first time in decades. Her hands were arthritic and shaky, but her watercolors of flowers bloomed with a beauty that made everyone stop and stare. "Where do you see flowers like that, Nana?" Goblino asked one day. She tapped her temple with a paint-stained finger. "In here, little Fang. In my memories and dreams." As the weeks turned to months, word of the lower reaches art circle spread beyond their neighborhood. Some upper reach goblins began to take notice, not all of them kindly. There were complaints to the city council about disturbing the peace and encouraging idleness among the working classes. One particularly cold morning, Goblino arrived at their usual meeting spot to find a crowd of angry-looking officials confronting Luminara. Their leader, a pompous goblin in an expensive coat, was waving an official-looking document. "This unauthorized gathering ends today," he was saying. "The city has received numerous complaints about the disruption you're causing." "What disruption?" Luminara asked calmly. "Children learning to express themselves through art." "These people," the official said, gesturing dismissively at the assembled children and adults, "need to focus on productive activities. Work, contributing to society, not wasting time with frivolous pursuits." Goblino felt anger rise in his chest. How dare this stranger call their art frivolous? How dare he dismiss them as these people? Before he realized what he was doing, Goblino stepped forward. "Art isn't frivolous," he said, his voice smaller than he intended, but growing stronger as he continued. "It's what makes us us. It's how we see the world and show others what we see. It's beautiful and important, and we're not hurting anyone." The official looked down at him with disdain. "A slum child lecturing me about art? How presumptuous!" "He's not presumptuous," said a voice from the crowd. It was Nana Wartooth, supported by her walking stick, but standing as tall as she could manage. "He's right. And you, sir, are a fool if you think beauty and creativity are luxuries only the wealthy deserve." More voices joined in. Scratch's mother, who worked double shifts at the textile factory, the old nut vendor, even Sludge's father, who rarely spoke to anyone. One by one, the residents of the lower reaches stepped forward to defend their art circle. "This has given my daughter something to look forward to," said one. "My son smiles now, really smiles, for the first time since his father died," said another. "You want to take away the one thing that brings light to this dark place?" demanded a third. The official seemed taken aback by the united front. He had expected to shut down a small gathering of troublemakers, not face an entire community defending something they valued. Luminara stepped forward, her own voice steady and strong. "If you truly believe art has no place in the lower reaches, then I challenge you to look at what these children have created." She gestured to a display of paintings and drawings they had set up. "Tell me this isn't valuable. Tell me these young artists don't deserve the same opportunities as any child in the upper reaches." The official glanced reluctantly at the artwork, and Goblino saw something flicker across his face. Surprise? Recognition? For a moment, his hard expression softened as he took in the beauty and skill evident in even the simplest pieces. "This is actually quite good," he admitted reluctantly. "It's more than good," Luminara said. "It's proof that talent and creativity exist everywhere, not just in fancy studios and expensive schools. These children have something precious to offer the world. The question is, will you help nurture that gift, or will you crush it before it has a chance to bloom?" A long silence fell over the group. Goblino held his breath, clutching his latest sketchbook to his chest. Finally, the official cleared his throat. Perhaps we were hasty. The complaints we received may have been exaggerated." He looked around at the eager faces surrounding him, the artwork that spoke of hope and determination and dreams that refused to be extinguished. "What would you need," he asked slowly, "to make this educational program official?" Luminara smiled. A permanent space would help. Supplies? Maybe someone from the city's arts department to oversee things and ensure we meet whatever standards are required." "I suppose that could be arranged," the official said. He was still frowning, but it was the thoughtful frown of someone solving a problem rather than the angry frown of someone causing one. As the officials left to file their paperwork and the crowd began to disperse, Luminara gathered the children around her. "You did something very important today," she told them. "You stood up for what you believed in. You showed that art isn't just pretty pictures. It's about having a voice, about being seen and heard and valued." Goblino looked around at his friends, at Nana Wartooth beaming with pride, at the drawings and paintings that had helped change an official's mind. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Luminara said. "We keep creating. We keep believing, and we keep proving that beautiful things can grow anywhere, even in the places others have forgotten." 6 months later, the Lower Reaches Community Arts Centre opened in a renovated warehouse just 2 blocks from where Goblino lived. It wasn't fancy. The floors were still concrete, and the walls still showed signs of their industrial past. But it was theirs. Goblino, now 9 years old and more confident than he'd ever imagined possible, had his first piece selected for display in the Upper Reaches Municipal Gallery. It was a portrait of Nana Wartooth, painted in oils he'd learned to use under Luminara's patient instruction. In the painting, Nana's eyes held all the wisdom and kindness he saw in them every day, and her weathered hands seemed to reach out from the canvas with warmth and love. The day his painting was hung in the gallery, Goblino stood before it with tears in his eyes. A small placard beside the frame read, "Portrait of Hope by Goblino Smallfang. Age 9, Lower Reaches Community Arts Centre." "How does it feel?" asked Luminara, who had come to see his work displayed among pieces by much older, more experienced artists. "To see your art hanging in the same gallery as masters." Goblino thought for a moment. "It feels like dreams can come true," he said. "But the best part isn't that it's hanging here. The best part is that when other kids from the lower reaches see it, they'll know they can dream too." Luminara put her hand on his shoulder. "You understand something very important, Goblino. Art isn't about being better than others or proving you belong in fancy places. It's about connection. It's about showing others that they're not alone, that beauty exists, and that every single person has something valuable to contribute to the world." As they walked home through the familiar streets of the lower reaches, Goblino saw his neighbourhood through artists' eyes. The setting sun painted the old buildings in shades of gold and amber. Children played in the alleys with laughter that seemed to light up the shadows. An elderly goblin sat on her front step, knitting something colourful that bloomed like a flower in her hands. It was the same place it had always been, poor, forgotten by most of the city, full of struggles and hardships. But now Goblino could see what Luminara had seen from the very beginning. It was also full of love, resilience, creativity, and hope. He pulled out his current sketchbook. He was on his 5th one now, and began to draw. Not because he had to, not because someone had assigned it, but because he had something beautiful to capture and share. In the margins of the drawing he wrote words he had learned to live by. "Where you start doesn't have to be where you end up. Dreams can grow anywhere, and every person, no matter where they come from, has something beautiful to offer the world." That night, as Nana Wartooth tucked him into bed in their small room in the warehouse, she looked at his latest sketch with pride. "You've come so far, little Fang," she said softly. "We all have," Goblino replied. "The art circle changed everyone." "No," Nana said, kissing his forehead. "You changed everyone. You had the courage to dream first, and that gave the rest of us permission to dream too." Goblino smiled as he drifted off to sleep, his sketchbook beside his pillow and his heart full of plans for tomorrow's drawings. Outside the window, the lower reaches settled into its nighttime rhythm, but now it was different. Now it was a place where dreams were not only allowed, but celebrated. And in the morning there would be art to create, friends to inspire, and a whole world of beauty waiting to be discovered by anyone brave enough to look for it. If you enjoyed this story about Goblino and the light in the shadows, please subscribe to the channel and drop the video a like for more Schlunky stories. Farewell for now.